Keanu Reeves was sitting on a wooden bench in a city park, gazing at a small pond where ducks and swans were peacefully gliding across the water. He wore simple dark jeans, a black t-shirt, and a light gray jacket. Nothing about his appearance suggested to passers-by that he was a global movie star. Next to him lay a book, and he was curiously listening to the conversations happening around him. Here, in the very center of a bustling city, where people searched for rest and tranquility, an event would soon occur that could change someone's fate. And nobody, not even Keanu himself, yet suspected how this day would end. This day began for a special young man, Oliver, as a hope for a peaceful walk, but very soon he would face cruelty that would make him feel helpless. And the most amazing part? The person who would come to his aid would turn out to be more than just a random kind stranger. This story might move you deeply. Subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and don't miss new videos every day at 2 o'clock. Oliver Adams, the young man with Down syndrome, had loved coming to this park since childhood. He was drawn by the gentle rustle of leaves, the subtle swaying of branches in the breeze, and the singing of birds flying around the old oaks. He wasn't wealthy, but he often saved on small things throughout the week to buy a bag of seeds for the birds. People who knew Oliver treated him differently, some with understanding, some with pity, and some with indifference. But most noticed the genuine warmth in his eyes and the innocent joy he took in each moment. On that day, Oliver wore his favorite gray sweater and sweatpants. He walked along a shaded path, trying not to hurry since he sometimes stumbled on uneven ground. In one hand, he carried a small paper bag of seeds, and in the other, a smartphone his mom had bought him. He rarely used the internet, but he loved listening to music and occasionally taking selfies as souvenirs. Keanu, sitting on a nearby bench, watched people pass by. Some jogged at a leisurely pace, some were happily talking on the phone, while others were quietly reading. Then his attention was drawn to a young man whose slightly awkward gait and very kind smile set him apart. The boy stopped by the edge of the pond and began feeding the ducks. It might have seemed like nothing special, yet the scene exuded a peaceful sincerity that made Keanu himself smile. He had no intention of interfering or introducing himself, he just observed. Sometimes simply being present is enough to absorb a bit more of that genuine goodness so often forgotten in daily life. However, the park's calm was shattered by an unpleasant voice. A woman, who carried herself with pointed self-confidence, almost arrogance, was striding quickly along the path. She was elegantly dressed in a blouse, skirt, and low-heeled shoes. Impatience was evident in her eyes, irritation in her posture. Her name was Morgan Smith, though no one present knew this, of course. To everyone around, she was just a stranger capable of disrupting the peaceful atmosphere at any moment. Morgan stopped near Oliver, seemingly noticing that a few seeds had fallen onto the path where she was walking. First she looked at the seeds, then at Oliver. Her gaze was sharp, as though she was determined to scold him for carelessness. Naturally, the scattered seeds weren't intentional, nor did they bother anyone, but for some reason, Morgan seemed personally offended by them. "Don't you watch where you're tossing things," she said loudly, drawing attention to herself. "Can't you be more careful?" Startled, Oliver quickly stepped back and tried to apologize. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean," he stammered, dropping a few more seeds from the bag. His face showed confusion and distress. "Look, you spilled more." Morgan sighed. "I'm in a hurry, and here you are making a mess. Maybe you should clean up after yourself first." Several people strolling nearby stopped, hearing her harsh tone. Keanu also rose slightly from his bench for a better view of what was happening, feeling a growing discomfort at this display of rudeness, though he had not yet intervened. Morgan started reprimanding Oliver. "Do you even realize how this looks to everyone? People are watching you litter." Her words sounded absurd, it was just a few spilled seeds, hardly a major problem. But for Morgan, the issue wasn't really about litter, it was about asserting herself at the expense of someone vulnerable. Oliver timidly tried to gather the spilled seeds with trembling hands but did so clumsily, causing some seeds to fall again. At that moment, he heard laughter. It wasn't the entire crowd laughing but one or two spectators who enjoyed mocking someone's weakness to feel better themselves. Tears began to fill Oliver's eyes. "Why are you so clumsy, huh?" Morgan snapped, annoyed that the boy had now begun crying. "Instead of fumbling around, maybe you should step aside." One elderly passerby noticed his tears and wanted to step in, but she was afraid to interfere. Keanu, on the other hand, felt he could remain silent no longer. He took a few steps forward and politely addressed Morgan. "It seems you're being a bit harsh on this young man. Couldn't you have spoken more calmly?" The woman looked him up and down. Seeing his simple clothes, she apparently pegged him as another bystander who thinks he's a hero. "And who are you to lecture me?" she sneered. "Look, there's plenty of space around. He can feed the duck somewhere else so he doesn't bother anyone." Keanu smiled gently, trying to avoid a fight. He only wanted her to stop insulting Oliver. Unfortunately, Morgan wasn't going to let it go. She clearly liked feeling superior. Now her aggression extended to Keanu as well. "You want him to go on scattering seeds everywhere? Let him keep littering, and then what? He'll come back tomorrow and do the same. Or do you think it's all allowed because of his condition?" she demanded, her voice taut with anger. "Anyway, who do you think you are? You think you're his defender?" At that, Keanu quietly replied, smiling slightly, "I'm just someone who believes everyone deserves respect. Especially when he hasn't done anything wrong." "How would you know?" Morgan snapped back, then turned to Oliver. "Why are you looking at me like that? You think just because you're special, you can get away with anything?" An audible gasp came from several onlookers. Even those who had stayed neutral began whispering to one another about this woman's shocking lack of sensitivity. Oliver shrank in fear and humiliation, as though wanting to disappear. But Keanu was already standing in front of him like an invisible shield. "Please," Keanu said firmly but gently, looking at Morgan, "don't talk to him that way. All he wanted to do was feed the birds. That's a normal thing to do in a park." Gratitude shone in Oliver's eyes. He felt both surprised and relieved that someone was calmly standing up for him. Something flared up in Morgan. She hated being contradicted, especially by a nobody, as she saw him. She glanced at Keanu from head to toe, noticing his slight stubble, basic boots, lack of expensive accessories, and apparently decided it would be easy to put both him and this awkward boy in their place. "And who are you, anyway?" she said icily. "I've already told you, don't butt into matters that don't concern you. And you," she added, turning to Oliver, "don't provoke me. It'd be better if you left and stopped embarrassing yourself." Oliver didn't know what to say. He knew he'd done nothing truly wrong, but Morgan's constant ridicule made him feel worthless. Painful memories flashed through his mind, kids at school calling him different, laughing at his condition. He remembered a time when he hadn't been able to respond to his classmates' bullying, and a caring teacher had stepped in, telling him, "You're stronger than you think. Learn to believe in yourself." But that memory felt distant now, drowned out by the cruelty of this moment. Keanu saw the inner suffering on Oliver's face. He himself recalled difficult times in his own youth. He realized he couldn't leave this kid to handle the abuse alone, especially as Morgan showed no sign of dialing back her hostility. "You know," Keanu said to Morgan, "your anger seems totally unjustified. I understand you were in a hurry, but you could have spoken more kindly. He didn't mean any harm. I don't care whether he meant it or not." Morgan barked. "I'm tired of seeing people who can't behave themselves. They think they're allowed to do anything. Look, I'm telling you again, don't meddle in my business, mister. What's your name?" She paused, expecting Keanu to identify himself. "Keanu," he said simply. "Keanu Reeves." A murmur rippled through the small crowd of onlookers. Some gaped in surprise, some whispered. A few tried to examine the man's face, comparing it to famous photos. But his casual clothing and modest demeanor didn't match the image of a movie star they were used to seeing on TV or posters. Some concluded it was just a coincidence of names. Others started suspecting he really was the Keanu Reeves. But Morgan, not noticing any of this, burst into laughter. Keanu Reeves? Sure. You think I'm stupid enough to believe a Hollywood star would just be wandering around this park? If you were the real Keanu, you'd have security, and you'd look, well, let's say, very different. Maybe looks aren't everything, Keanu replied. I just like to keep things simple. Without fanfare. Oh, please, who are you fooling? Morgan shouted, still unaware he wasn't joking. Fine, whatever. But as for him, she turned back to Oliver, once again, if he's special, that doesn't give him the right to inconvenience normal people. That was the last straw. Some witnesses were already preparing to intervene, having seen enough of her callousness toward a person with special needs. However, Keanu stepped forward and spoke firmly. No one here is inconvenienced. In fact, you're creating a scene. You could have just walked by or politely said you didn't like what he was doing if you truly believed he was scattering seeds in the wrong place. Instead, you chose to humiliate him. That's not right. Morgan narrowed her eyes, looking back and forth between Oliver and this strange defender, calling himself Keanu Reeves. She had no idea that many in the crowd were already thinking, what if that really is him? While Morgan fumed, Keanu turned to Oliver and asked quietly, are you all right? Oliver nodded, still wiping his tears. Thank you for standing up for me. I can't respond quickly when someone yells at me. It's all right, Keanu said gently, smiling. You shouldn't have to listen to that on your own. No one should put up with that. Morgan scoffed. She saw the crowd's attention shifting to this heroic stranger, further fueling her rage. She lifted her chin and spoke loudly. And who are all of you to judge me? This boy just, well, what does he even do? Probably nothing. That's why he roams around here all day. Not true, Oliver said quietly. I work part-time in a library. I really love books, and the library is near here, so I often come to this park. Some in the crowd gave understanding smiles. This young man, despite his challenges, was trying to live a full life. Keanu gave him an encouraging pat on the shoulder. That's great. Keep feeding the ducks if you want. Don't listen to anyone trying to destroy your kindness. Oliver's eyes filled with gratitude. It felt wonderful that someone calmly had his back. Morgan sensed she was losing ground. From the start, the conflict had no real basis, but she couldn't drop her need to assert herself. She looked at the people around her with contempt. You're all so quick to take anyone's side just to make me look like the wicked witch. Nobody ever thinks that I have an important meeting to get to. Nobody cares that I've wasted time watching him scatter bird food and get seeds on my shoes. Many shook their heads in disbelief. Another moment or two, and someone might openly mock her complaints. But Keanu preferred a peaceful resolution, even though he condemned her rudeness. If you'd like, he said to Morgan, I can buy you something hot from the nearby cafe, tea or coffee, to help you relax. It'll only take 5 minutes, and I bet you can still make your meeting. That's better than arguing. Morgan was taken aback. She jerked backward as though Keanu had said something offensive. Buy me coffee? Why would you do that? I don't need you or your coffee. She brushed a strand of hair aside, trying to regain her frosty composure. If you people are all so kind, stay in your precious park and... She turned sharply, about to leave, but she stumbled. Keanu instinctively reached out to help her, but she straightened up on her own, her face turning red with anger and embarrassment. Don't touch me, she yelled. And stop pretending you're that that Keanu Reeves. You think anyone is impressed by that? Finally, she stormed off, stomping on the path in a huff, muttering under her breath. People watched her go, relieved. But she wasn't heading too far, she was moving toward another exit of the park, and fate had not ruled out another encounter. Keanu and Oliver remained on the path, surrounded by curious onlookers. Some were already filming on their phones, eager to post this story on social media. Keanu felt uncomfortable with the attention. He didn't crave publicity or want his heroic deed to go viral. But he also knew he couldn't control it. Oliver looked at his rescuer gratefully. Are you really, that Keanu Reeves? Sorry if that's too direct a question. Yes, Keanu shrugged lightly. But I'd rather people treat me like just another guy. I didn't recognize you at first because I'm not great at remembering faces, Oliver admitted. But your movies always inspired me. My mom used to show them to me whenever I felt down. I'm glad if they helped you, and that I can support you now in real life. Oliver smiled, wiping away the last of his tears. Thank you, he added, blushing slightly. Keanu smiled back and suggested. Let's find a quiet spot and sit down. I plan to spend more time here anyway. We can talk if you'd like. Oliver gladly agreed. They moved away from the crowd to a small corner of the park with an old bench under a large tree. A few curious onlookers followed at a respectful distance, hoping to hear or film something interesting. But Keanu and Oliver paid them no mind. They sat. Oliver unintentionally began sharing his life story, how he had always felt sideways glances from people, how his friends and mother supported him, but how the world still felt harsh. How he got a job as a library assistant and tried his hardest to prove he could be helpful to others. But sometimes, an encounter with a rude individual could shatter his confidence. Keanu listened closely, offering gentle words of support. He didn't like talking about himself, he preferred hearing other stories. Soon, the elderly woman who'd earlier wanted to intervene approached them. Excuse me, young man, she said to Oliver. I wasn't sure what to do when that woman was yelling. But I was so glad someone stood up for you. You're a good guy, don't let her words hurt you. Oliver thanked her, and the woman left, feeling more at ease. See? Keanu said. Not everyone wants to yell and insult. Most people are kind, but some lack the courage to intervene. Others don't know how to react. The important thing is there's always someone who will step up. Oliver lowered his eyes, smiling. A warm feeling spread inside him. Every word from Keanu felt imbued with sincerity. While they were talking, Morgan Smith, the same woman, finally found the park exit. But it turned out her car was parked on the opposite side, and she discovered she'd somehow dropped her keys when she almost fell. Realizing they were missing and that they were likely near the place of the earlier confrontation, Morgan, fuming at the idea of going back, returned to the spot. She walked even faster, scanning the ground for her keys. Eventually she saw Keanu and Oliver sitting on a bench under a tree with only a few people around them. She hesitated, wondering if she should ask for help. But her pride and anger flared up again. I won't degrade myself, she thought, trying to scan the ground by herself. After a couple of minutes searching in vain, she understood she might need someone to point her in the right direction. Tentatively, she headed to the bench where they sat. Oliver noticed her approach first. He tensed, expecting more attacks. But Keanu looked over calmly. Excuse me, Morgan began, clearly wrestling with her words. I lost something here. Did you see any keys? There's a little elephant figurine on the keychain. Oliver trembled slightly but gathered courage to smile. I can help you look, if you want. Do you remember where you might have dropped them? Morgan froze, not expecting such a response from the boy she had just insulted. A strange mixture of awkwardness and guilt flickered in her eyes, though she tried to remain aloof. I don't want to waste my time. Just tell me if you saw them, she said curtly. Keanu gave her a thoughtful look. We haven't seen any keys. But let's look together. It'll be faster than searching alone. Morgan, as though struggling with herself, nodded. Oliver stood, and the three of them walked along the path, scanning the ground. Morgan stayed silent, though from time to time her eyes betrayed her conflict. Perhaps she was finally feeling remorse. But she still tried to act distant. After a few minutes, Oliver spotted something shiny near a stone next to the bench where Keanu had been sitting. He bent down, picked up the keys, and recognized the small elephant charm. Are these yours? He asked, holding them out to Morgan. Yes, she said, avoiding eye contact. Thanks. She extended her hand, and Oliver carefully placed the keys in her palm. At that moment, she reluctantly looked him in the eyes, seeing his gentle expression, the same person she had mocked and humiliated. She felt a stab of guilt. She attempted, but the words stuck in her throat. She couldn't get out a genuine thank you or sorry. Instead, she simply turned abruptly and walked away. This time, she finally left the park for real, without looking back. Oliver watched her go, conflicting emotions crossing his face. On one hand, the hurt and anger from her unfair words. On the other, the sense that Morgan might have felt remorse, even if she couldn't express it. Could it change anything? Keanu gently laid a hand on Oliver's shoulder. Your words and actions did more than you think. Sometimes people don't know how to apologize out loud, but they start changing inside. Let's hope this is one of those cases. Oliver nodded, feeling a bit of relief. Thank you for being here. Keanu smiled modestly. Glad we got through it together. They decided to return to the bench and continue talking about life. It was going to be a long day, and Keanu didn't want to leave Oliver alone with his worries. They'd taken only a few steps when a family with a small child approached them. The little girl recognized Keanu as a famous actor and smiled shyly. The parents politely asked for a photo. Keanu, not fond of extra attention, nevertheless couldn't refuse the child's request. He signed an autograph on a small piece of paper, and the girl beamed with happiness. When the family left, Oliver smiled. It's amazing, seeing people recognize you, and how calmly you react. Keanu shrugged. I try not to place myself above anyone. After all, we're all humans, each with our own stories, joys, and sorrows. That's what I admire about you, Oliver said. Sometimes I feel like I can't handle the world. But it helps to see people who've also had difficulties yet kept their kindness. Oliver's eyes momentarily clouded as he remembered the day, long ago, when he was walking down his school corridor. A classmate had pushed him in front of everyone, calling him names. Oliver fell, and the other kids laughed, except for one girl who helped him up. That simple gesture had given him so much strength at the time. And now, as an adult, he'd encountered a similar situation, but found another person who was ready to stand up for him. Keanu noticed the distant look in Oliver's eyes and realized he was drifting into memories. He didn't pressure him to speak further, letting him silently process what had happened. Meanwhile, a few park visitors noticed Keanu more closely. Rumors about the real Keanu Reeves being in the park traveled fast. A young woman approached, phone in hand, filming a live story. Guys, you won't believe it, Keanu Reeves is here. They say he stood up for a boy with Down syndrome. Keanu, still trying to remain friendly, politely asked for some personal space, though he knew avoiding the buzz would be nearly impossible. Maybe let's walk a bit deeper into the park where it's quieter. Oliver suggested. Sure, Keanu agreed. They headed to a smaller corner of the park featuring an open-air reading area, benches under a canopy and a little shelf with free books. It was almost empty there. Oliver smiled, recognizing the setup. He often helped maintain these books as part of his library duties. They both sat on a bench. Oliver proudly showed Keanu how the books were neatly arranged and how important it was for every reader to treat them with care. After a while, their conversation turned more personal. Oliver admitted he sometimes felt afraid to go out in public, unsure if he'd face a new wave of hostility. Still, he was determined to overcome his fears and dreamed of a more tolerant society. Keanu listened intently. "I understand," he said. "Many people don't realize how hurtful a single harsh word can be. But I believe kindness is contagious. One good deed can inspire others to be compassionate." Oliver smiled. "Yeah, I see that's exactly what happened today. People thought about how someone's unafraid to stand up for another. Maybe next time, they'll do it themselves." Although they'd found a quieter spot, people still approached them occasionally. Some wanted an autograph, others simply shook Keanu's hand, thanking him for not walking away. At one point, a middle-aged woman asked to take a photo with Oliver, saying she wanted to show her son that kindness can be found everywhere. Oliver was embarrassed, but Keanu jokingly winked, "You see, fame has found you too." The woman laughed and took the picture. Soon, the curious onlookers dispersed, leaving Keanu and Oliver alone. The sun was slowly setting, the breeze rustling leaves, and the air carried the scent of flowers and freshly cut grass. "I should probably get going," Oliver said, checking his watch. "My mom worries when I'm late, and I need to buy her some throat lozenges. She's a bit under the weather." "I hope she feels better soon," Keanu replied gently. Oliver got up and sighed. "Keanu, thank you. I'll remember this day. Not only the bad part that happened but also your support. It means a lot to me. I'm glad I could help. You're a good person, and you shouldn't be ashamed of it. People who insult others are usually unhappy themselves." Oliver smiled. They exchanged a handshake. He walked a few steps away when Keanu suddenly remembered something and called out, "Oliver." He turned around. "I'm planning to come back to the park tomorrow if I don't have filming. Maybe we can meet up again. Grab some tea, talk about books." Oliver's smile grew wider. "That sounds great. I'd love that." He waved goodbye and headed down the path toward the exit, carrying a newfound sense of confidence and a warm feeling in his heart. Keanu remained on the bench, watching the sky tinged with gentle sunset hues. He felt a quiet joy. He'd done something genuinely important today. He hadn't saved the entire world or performed a grand Hollywood-style feat, but he had defended someone. And maybe that was far more valuable than any on-screen heroics. Just then, a man of about 40, dressed casually, approached him. The man smiled shyly. "Sorry to bother you. I just wanted to say thanks for standing up for that young guy. I didn't know what to do when she was shouting at him. I felt ashamed for just standing by. You set a good example." Keanu nodded. "Thank you for telling me. Maybe next time you, or someone else, will stand up on your own." "That's wonderful." The man smiled in return and walked away. Keanu thought, maybe now he'll be the one to intervene if he ever sees injustice. That's the essence of these so-called small acts of kindness, something he kept reminding people about. After the man left, Keanu checked his phone. He had several missed calls from a producer, the film crew, and some friends, likely because a video of what had happened was already online, and everyone wanted to understand the situation. But it was so peaceful here among the whispering leaves that he wasn't ready to dive into a flurry of calls yet. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and recalled that his evening would be a simple one, maybe cooking some pasta, reading a script, then going to bed. No glamorous parties, no paparazzi flashing cameras at his door. He liked it that way, feeling truly comfortable as one of the people. Another 15 minutes passed, and Keanu got up, preparing to leave. Walking along the path by the pond, he saw a group of teenagers giggling over a video on their phones. Keanu realized it was footage of his confrontation with Morgan, already trending on social media. One of the teens said, "Look, that's the same park we hang out in." Another responded, "No way, really? And that's the real Keanu?" A third added, "It must be. There's that bench we know." Keanu walked on, trying not to catch their attention. One boy stared at him, perhaps recognizing him, but he seemed unsure. Keanu smiled inwardly and continued on his way. Twilight was falling, casting long shadows across the park, which grew emptier by the minute. Before reaching the street, Keanu turned back to the spot where it all began. Scattered seeds still lay on the path, some of what Oliver had dropped. A soft breeze rustled them, as if reminding him that kindness can spring from the simplest, smallest actions. That's real magic, he thought. Then he walked away with confidence. Tomorrow would be a new day, and maybe he, Oliver, and the other passers-by, each with their own story, would meet again. That brief incident might become the start of a chain of good deeds, for Oliver, the reassurance that someone would stand up for him, for Morgan, a reason to reconsider how she treated others, and for the bystanders, an example that sometimes it only takes a single word or gesture to support someone. A final thought resonated softly in Keanu's mind, as if directed toward all of us: remember that even the smallest act of kindness can make the world a better place. You never know who might need your help right here, right now. And if you can help, do it. Because any of us, no matter how simple or modest, can be someone else's ray of light. So, dear viewers, we've reached the end of this heartfelt story. Yes, Oliver started his day facing public humiliation and scorn. Yes, he encountered cruelty and misunderstanding. But everything changed when someone refused to turn a blind eye. And it wasn't just about Keanu Reeves' celebrity status, it was about his humanity, his kindness, and his willingness to help. His actions inspired many who witnessed the situation. Perhaps now, those people will stand up for someone in need the next time they see an injustice. After all, as Keanu himself said, small gestures of kindness can create big miracles. Let this story serve as a reminder to us all. If you see someone who needs support, reach out. Believe me, your compassion can spark truly magical changes in someone else's life. And who knows? Maybe you'll be that unexpected presence that turns their fate in a better direction.